Hi everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on how to use InformalScience.org to make your case. This webinar is being recorded, and everyone who registered for the webinar will receive the recording via email sometime within the next few days. Before we get started, let's take a moment to go over the agenda. The webinar will start with an introduction from the case project director and PI, followed by a walkthrough of InformalScience.org. Then we will discuss how to leverage the site while developing and implementing ASIL proposals. We'll be taking questions at the end of the presentation, but please feel free to type your questions into the question box as they occur to you. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can.
Hello and thank you for joining everyone. This is Jamie Bell. I'm the project director and PI of the Center for Advancement of Informal Science Education, CASE. And we have been working on this series of webinars with the NSF Advancing Informal STEM Learning Program. So this is the second in the series of live ones, and we'll talk a little bit more about those at the end. But just wanted to point out that with regard to the purpose of this webinar, using the site to help develop proposals, that in general, that ASIL proposals must make a strong case for advancing the informal STEM learning field, and do that via innovative ideas, building a stronger knowledge base, and that implies that those who propose need to be clear in the proposal what they understand the state of the field currently is in their particular domain of interest and area that they intend to work, including the audience. And one important way you can do that is through a thorough search and knowledge of InformalScience.org, which we'll be talking about today, and is the website of this resource center, CASE. And I want to also point out that CASE is also a group of people who are here working on resources every day for the field of informal STEM learning. And so if you, in the process of using the site, exploring it, searching, what have you, if you have questions about things that you can't find or want further information on projects, PIs, or any of the products, that you are free to and most welcome to email us case@informalscience.org. And we'll mention that again at the end. The website really tries to, in the repository, tries to strike a nice balance between project descriptions, research, and evaluation. And we think of it as a dynamic interplay between these three aspects of any project, or what build often a stronger project and stronger products and findings from a project. So those are the three main categories of this in the repository. I'll be joined on the webinar today by Grace Troxel, who introduced the webinar, who's our digital librarian and collections analyst, as well as Suzanne Perrin, who's currently a postdoctoral researcher at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And Suzanne and I and others, I'm sure, who are on this webinar have all been prospective PIs. We've also been PIs and maybe are PIs currently on projects, and we've sometimes been successful and sometimes not been successful in our proposals. So there's knowledge in the field among colleagues about building stronger proposals through knowledge and collaboration. I'm just going to tell a real brief story about my own experience early on as a project manager at the Exploratorium in San Francisco in the mid to late 90s, where I was in charge of a group of exhibit developers who were in the process of revisiting and revising the physics exhibits. And in the process of doing that, we began to realize that there were some issues among exhibits and the amount of stay time and that people spent, the amount of engagement that people participated in, the length of that engagement, and we began to see the potential for what we thought might be an interesting project that was potentially could be funded by the National Science Foundation. And at the time, as a large and well-networked museum, we were aware of the work of some of our other colleagues in the field, at that time in particular, Museum of Science Boston, who were working on an exhibit called Investigate, and the Science Museum of Minnesota, who were working on an experiment gallery or experiment benches exhibits, which we were aware were working on similar types of issues, looking at engaging people for longer times and in more meaningful ways. So through interaction with those and exploration of those other projects, we were able to develop a stronger proposal than we would have on our own to just explore the design features that would lead to what we called active prolonged engagement. At the time, CASE didn't exist and InformalScience.org didn't exist. And one way that we think about the site now and the resource that we're trying to build is to provide easy access to knowledge from other projects that may be similar to yours or working in areas that could inform yours and would expedite the process of building collaborations and projects, developing projects. So that's our hope for the site, and we'll hopefully demonstrate a couple ways today, pathways for how that might work. I'm going to turn it back over to Grace now.
Okay, so we're going to start out by taking a look at InformalScience.org and what some of the different resources are that you can find there. We have two main types of resources on the site. We have the repository that contains project descriptions, research, gray literature like conference proceedings and posters, and evaluation reports. And then we also have case-created content about the field and about navigating different areas like projects, research, and evaluation. We're going to start by looking at the ASIL landing page that you can find right here on the screen. I'm going to go into that now. Oops, here it is. Okay, the ASIL landing page. And this is a page that we created to provide information about the ASIL solicitation, including important dates, upcoming webinars, and links to resources that we think would be useful while you're putting together your proposals. Okay, I'm also going to point out the What is Informal Science page. This page has a video on it and provides some introductory material for people who are new to the field to kind of get grounded and understand what's been going on before. Now we're going to take a look at the repository. So in the repository, each of the resources that we have is tagged according to different metadata categories to make it easier for users to search and browse. We have the resource type list, which talks about project descriptions, different types of research and research products, like literature reviews, articles, thesis work, dissertations, reference materials like books and conference proceedings, evaluation instruments that are embedded within different reports, evaluation reports. So you can use those resource types if you're looking for something specific. Learning environment refers to the type of environment or intervention in which a project takes place. For example, media and technology, we have broadcast media, websites, films and IMAX, and then the list goes on through different types of public programs, professional development, exhibits, and formal informal connections. Our access and inclusion metadata are aimed at projects that have been doing broadening participation work with various different groups. We have audience, which refers to both the primary and the secondary audience types. So for example, if you have a project that is conducted in a museum that targets middle schoolers, both museum and ISE professionals and middle school children would be tagged. We have STEM discipline, but that goes beyond STEM to include things like art. We have a sort by date, so you can filter if you want to only browse recent projects. We have funding. Our website does contain ASL project descriptions, but it also contains project descriptions of what's been funded outside of NSF from agencies like IMLS, the Institute of Museum and Library Services, NOAA, NASA, and more. And you can also search by contributor. If you type a name into this box, contributors refer to both principal investigators and also authors or evaluators. So now we're going to do a search and actually search the collection. I've typed in a search term here, cogenerative dialogues. And whenever we press the go button, this will take us to a search results page, which you can see here. We have 7 results for this search. If you look at the left-hand side of the screen, you can see these drop-downs that allow you to filter even further. And these drop-downs only appear whenever there is something to show. So you won't see very many options in here now because there are only 7 results. And the more things you select, the narrower your search will be. Let's go ahead and click on one of these results. You can see with these results that you have an icon, which represents whether it is a project description, an evaluation report, or a researcher reference material. There's the date, and there's a category and a little excerpt. We're going to scroll down and click on the project description, which we can see here. So this project is transforming students' partnerships with scientists through cogenerative dialogues. And you can see on this detail page the date that the project was funded. You can see the different learning environments that this falls into. This particular project involved after-school programs and a laboratory. You can see the audience. This project engaged scientists and students who were working with high school students on different STEM-related subjects. And you can see the abstract of the project website, the funding information, and the project products that came out of this. There are a bunch of different posters that came out of this project, and there are evaluation reports. And if you wanted to learn more about this type of work, you could read those. If you click on the evaluation report, you'll go to another detail page that will link to the actual report, and will link back to the project. Everything is interconnected in the repository, so you can trace the funding and the products of that funding. You can also trace the people, which is interesting if you are looking for collaborators or you want to contact people who have done different types of work before. If someone is a member, you can click on them and get straight to their profile page. So here's an example. We're going to go to Pei Ling's profile page, and you can email her directly through the website, and you can also see all of the different things that she has done before. Okay, so that's an example of using the search to find literature. Now we're going to look at another different way to find collaborators. I'm going to click on the Community tab, which takes us to this page. And then I'm going to go into the Member Directory. From the Member Directory, you can identify people who have done work in specific areas. You can search by expertise. So if you're looking for an evaluator, you can select evaluation, and find people who have done that before. You can select different institution types using that drop down. You can also search regionally if you select the country filter, and once you've selected the country filter, you'll have a further option that will appear that will allow you to search by state. And that will help you find people who are site members. And these are all things that people have tagged themselves as. So if you want to be more discoverable, you should update your profile and select the different filters. Now let's move on from the repository and explore some of the other content on the site that CASE created to help navigate the proposal development process. We have three main menus on the site. We have Develop Projects, we have Discover Research, and we have Design Evaluation. And each of these menus contains different landing pages addressing different topics in the field and parts of the solicitation process. We're going to start with Develop Projects, and I'm going to pass it over to Suzanne.
Thanks, Grace. So I'm going to talk about the Develop Project pages. The Develop Project pages and those that are in there go over the life cycle of an ISE project, from conception to preparing a proposal, the implementation, doing the evaluation, all the way through to final reports to funders. Planning and developing a new project. This section really gives an overview of the things that you'll be doing now, probably, as you're preparing your proposal. There's a list of the steps to preparing that proposal, which of course do not necessarily happen in this order. It's certainly not a linear progression in any way. You'll want to review current research, get together a team, go over the funder guidelines and things, and this is a good page to come back to on your own after the webinar is over and review everything that's on here and make sure that you're getting all of the elements ready as you're preparing a proposal to be funded. As you're going through, and you're probably focused now on the ASOL solicitation, but the funding pages list many different sources, including National Science Foundation, that typically fund informal STEM projects. So everyone's probably focusing now on ASOL deadlines, but there are other funders out there if NSF doesn't seem like the right fit or your project doesn't get funded. So there's other sources that you can look at down there. As you scroll through the page, there's a list here of other sources, including NSF. Also, one I wanted to point out is the section about preparing a proposal. There's some tips here about it. And one in particular I wanted to point out is that if you're a new organization and you haven't received funding from a particular source before or within a specified time frame, you may have to prepare a set of documents about your organization, including articles of incorporation and bylaws, which sometimes includes a discovery that those have to be updated by the organization's board. So assembling those documents early on can be really critical. And these are some of the documents listed here that you'll have to likely pull together for the project. Then, while reporting and dissemination seems like a long way off right now when you're just writing a proposal, it's important to consider the time and personnel and budget that will be required to accommodate these aspects of the project. The end of a project doesn't just happen when an episode airs or an exhibit opens and then closes, but there's a lot of reports that will have to get prepared along the way to the funder, and then communicating back to the community the lessons learned along the way. So this section of the website has suggestions for how to disseminate the project. and doing reporting that you might have to anticipate along the way. There's also some suggestions about what counts as dissemination, because sometimes anticipating that ahead of development opportunities. And then, so this leads us into learning from experience. Informal STEM education has been going on for many years, and there's a lot of hard-won experience out there from educators and researchers. So it's likely that when you were a kid, you went to a museum or watched a TV show, and those people have been sharing tips and learning from mistakes over all these years. So don't assume that just because perhaps you're new to the field that the kind of thing that you're imagining for your project has never been done before. The Learn from Experience page can link you to the wealth of best practices and strategies for engaging many diverse audiences and many different kinds of settings and media. So reviewing the pages here, doing searches in the collections can help you plan more innovative programs and figure out research directions that can build on past experience, which all the program officers really appreciate. And then, once you've been funded on your project and made progress on it, writing up research and evaluation findings and contributing resources back to InformalScience.org helps the next round of work. And you can find that down here. You can go to Submit Resources up at the top of the page, or down here at this link. You can also just contact case at InformalScience.org. But one of the things I really appreciate about the STEM and ISE community is that cycle of drawing on collective knowledge that's been gained and then sharing it back. And it really makes ISE into a great community. And then finally, especially for scientists who are coming into informal science as a way of broadening impacts, the Communicating Science and Public Engagement page here has a number of resources for helping with creating program ideas and training programs. All right, Grace, I'll pass that back to you.
Okay. All right, now we are going to take a look at the evaluation tab on InformalScience.org, and you can get to this page by clicking on Design Evaluation. Evaluation is one of the biggest questions that people have who are new to the field, especially how evaluation and research are different. And these pages do go into the differences and nuances between the two. And if you go down to this underneath what to learn more about evaluation, underneath that heading, there is a link to the Principal Investigator's Guide to Managing Evaluation in Informal STEM Education Projects. And this is a document that CASE produced in partnership with the Visitor Studies Association, which provides an introduction to evaluation, not from the evaluator's perspective, but from the PI's perspective. And it's really about how to integrate evaluation into all of the different steps of your project development process so that you can get the most out of the evaluation process and really leverage it through your work. Also in the evaluation pages, I'm going to go back to the evaluation landing page here, and then we're going to go into developing an evaluation plan. Whenever you go into developing an evaluation plan, you'll hit this page, which has links of handbooks and guides and checklists and frameworks for understanding evaluation. This includes things like the team-based inquiry guide or the framework for evaluating impacts of informal science education projects, or the common guidelines for education research and development. And these things are all linked here. And if we scroll down the page, there are also resources about navigating the process of working with an institutional review board, and resources for culturally responsive evaluation. If we click on working with an evaluator, here we go. This tab gives some tips for working with an evaluator, but then also finding an evaluator. For example, the American Evaluation Association has a database for finding evaluators, and so does the Stellar website. They're the resource center for the NSF iTest program. Okay, now let's take a look at the research tabs. Whenever we're looking through these research menus, I'm going to start with what are the important gaps in informal STEM education research. And when we open up this page, one of the main things that it links to at the bottom of the page are research agendas in the field. There are a number of different research agendas that different sectors have been working on. For example, 21st century natural history learning, zoos and aquariums, making and tinkering, and children's museums. And by contacting these associations and learning more about what research agendas are currently going on in the field, you can connect to work that has already been going on. Another big resource under the Discover Research tab is EBSCO. So if we click on EBSCO, EBSCO is a database that provides access to peer-reviewed research from journals related to education. This is the Education Research Complete database. And it is available for free to all members of InformalScience.org. This is especially good for any of you who are not working in a university setting, because these articles are often behind a paywall. So please take advantage of this resource and use it to help discover some of the research that's been conducted already. Some of the journals that you can access through this are Science Education, Science and Children, and Cultural Studies of Science Education, but there are thousands of them. Okay, now let's talk about keeping up to date with news in the field. Let's click on News and Views. This is a place where you can keep up with new developments in the field. This is the case blog. You can also use it as a dissemination mechanism. So every month we do a newsletter and we do a spotlight, which features an ASIL project. And the spotlight is the story of a project. Here's an example of one that we did earlier this summer. And you can see they generally include pictures and they talk about a project's process. And it's a really good way of sharing your work and contributing to the field's knowledge. You can also find out about funding opportunities and calls for papers and conferences and similar things going on. Next, let's move to the InformalScience.org calendar. Let me scroll to the top of the page there. Okay, so the calendar is a place on the site to discover events. This includes conferences, webinars, funding deadlines, and you can use the filters at the top of the page to narrow down this calendar. So if we click on conferences, we can see some of the upcoming conferences in the field. Let's let that load. Here we go. And you can see these are all of the conferences that are coming up within the next month or so. And there are a lot of them. And looking at what conferences are going on in the field can also help you when you're trying to disseminate your work. Just knowing what places are available for you to submit posters to or presentations. Okay. And as Suzanne mentioned, you can submit resources to the site using the orange Submit Resources button in the top right corner of the site. And the site really is as strong as it is because of the informal STEM learning community. And by sharing your own work, you make the entire field stronger. Okay, now I'm going to pass it back to Suzanne, who will talk about some different pathways for using the site in practice.
All right, so let me pull up the page. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some ways of using the website that I've done in preparing proposals and in disseminating some of the work I've done. So one of the projects, the work that I'm working on right now, it's an ASIL project, and it wasn't actually successful on its first try at getting funding. The PI is a snow researcher, and he's quite happy snow machining around the Arctic out in the snow. But he had had some experience leading public tours at a permafrost tunnel. And he wanted to do some outreach about permafrost and how it was up there in Alaska. So he wrote a proposal doing some outreach, had big plans doing some research around what it means to use real objects. But he wasn't successful in getting it funded on the first try. So after that, he talked with program officers a lot, and he linked up with OMSI and expanded the education research component, and then was successful on a second try at getting that project funded. So now we're using InformalScience.org for some of the project dissemination. Here there is a description of the project there on the site. It has a lot of information about the different components, about the outreach work and the exhibit that's being built, and the research questions that we're investigating for that are integrated into that project. We've put some items up here on InformalScience.org that are related to the project. There's the project description, and then there's several posters that we have presented over the past 2 years. There's still 1 year left on the project, so we'll be adding more items, including evaluations and more about our research projects there as we wrap those up in the next year. But you can see you can use this along the way to share what you're doing with the field. There was a spotlight about the project that came out in the CASE newsletter last year and was up on the blog. So that's here, and it tells a lot more about the background of the project and how it came to be. And also, there is one of our posters that we presented at the Aztec conference last year. You can see that here, the pulled up in the search. This is also a great way if you're preparing posters or presentations for other conferences when you're at that point, to see what's out there and what they look like, especially if you haven't been to one of these conferences before. What is a practitioner-oriented conference like Aztec or AAM when you're sharing these kinds of projects? So that was kind of the ending of a project, what happens when you already have something going on. But as I've been working to write proposals, Informal Science has been really helpful in finding literature and programs to build off of. So for another successful grant that I've been working on, it was initiated by a science center, and they pulled together a bunch of collaborators from a local university and some community colleges that serve rural students to create a college course that let the students read a peer-reviewed journal together and explore some peer-reviewed science work. And then they attended a science festival at the end of their semester where they got to meet those scientists who wrote those papers. So we use InformalScience.org for our literature reviews. As you can see here, there's some of the items that we were interested in. Does attending a large science event enthuse students about science careers? You know, not all those search results are going to be exactly what you're looking for, but it's great to browse through all of those. And then you can connect through some of those search results to literature. So one of the places that we've been looking is looking at science communication research, and we are able to link through to the Journal of Research and Science Teaching that has several peer-reviewed journal articles that are free access for everyone. Then, again, we were looking at for different programs. And as we were looking at what projects were out there, we came up with some really good research questions along the way. So we were able to add to the evaluation a set of a research component to it as well. And we were able to really use InformalScience.org to help us figure out just what those questions might be and what some of those aspects were that we could approach with our program. But then we found, as we were doing it, we needed to find some validated instruments to use as part of our research program, and there we were able to look here at InformalScience.org and find some of those, including one that we're using that's Modified Attitudes Towards Science Inventory, and you can get that product here and read all about it. You know, much like discovery in science, writing a proposal is not very linear, and it's pretty messy, and you know, when you read the finished product, it looks great, but the process of writing it is really, it's a writing process, and so you have to develop your exciting idea and get collaborators in place, and then there's the whole process of writing that can be really tricky in order to contort your idea and to being expressed in a way that is, meets the format of the solicitation and making sure it aligns with all the goals of the funder. So browsing InformalScience.org can provide a lot of inspiration and help you find people who have the expertise that you need and that you can work with well. So searching the website as you are looking up literature and finding ideas for programs and reaching out to those people by emailing is a great way to get in touch. And then don't forget the importance of just making a phone call. And if that person doesn't seem like a good match for your partnership, if you need it, you can ask them for a suggestion of someone else who might be. And contacting CASE, you know, Jamie and Grace and others there have a great network, and they know everybody and seems to know what's going on in the field, so they can help put you in touch with others and help you find resources that you need. And with that plug, I'll pass it back to Grace.
Okay. So one thing that I realized that I forgot to say whenever I was walking through the site earlier is I was going to show you how to find information about the previous ASIL principal investigator meetings. These meetings take place every 2 years approximately, although the date of the next one is still to be determined. But to find out what's gone on at some of these meetings and to browse posters and materials, you go to About Case at the very bottom of the page, which will take you to this page that's About Case. And then in the bottom right corner, there is a link to PI meetings, as well as case convenings and inquiry groups that occurred in the past. So if we click on PI meetings, we get to this page. Let me see. Yeah, you can see it now. Okay. And then there are links to the 2016, 2014, 2012, 2010, and 2008 meetings. And if you click on any one of these links, here's the 2016 one, you can see an overview of what happened at that meeting, as well as slides from presentations and a list of the different posters presented by AZEL projects. The posters are really good to look at if you want to get an idea of what different AZEL projects look like while they're in progress. Almost all of the funded projects who came to the PI meeting brought posters, so take a look through those. And before we move on to questions, I just wanted to plug the upcoming AZEL webinars that will be taking place over the next week or so. There will be a webinar with program officers on how to write a competitive AZEL proposal that will be on September 19th from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. And then there will be one on broadening participation, which will take place on September 22nd. That'll also be from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern. And you can find the registration links for those on that main AZEL page or under News and Views. Okay, let's move on to questions. And just a reminder, you can type those questions into the question box. One question that we got is how to go from this search box to the menu with all of the different drop-down filters. You can do that by clicking on Advanced Search, and that will bring out that tray with the extra options. You can also get to that on any different search result page, actually pretty much any page on the site. So if we go back here, you can see the search box that's in the right-hand corner. And you can also click on Advanced Search there. And it'll take you to the Advanced Search. Let's see. Okay, here's another question. With changes in the site over recent years, what advice do you have for sharing evaluation reports? My main advice is to just use the submission form, which we have streamlined over the years. And once you submit an evaluation report using the Submit Resources form, it will show up approximately 2 business days later on the site, because I do look at every submission to the site before it goes live and make sure that it's tagged correctly and ask any questions that I need to ask before posting it there. If you have a lot of evaluation reports, then you can email them to us directly. You can reach out to us at case@informalscience.org. I know some people do have a lot of reports, so that just makes it easier to share.
It looks like we're getting a lot of questions, so we'll try to take as many as we can in this time. But one important one that will help others probably is that some folks wanted to be sure that the recording would be available for those who want to repeat, listen back to the information. And yes, it will be. If you're registered, you will receive a link, and you can go back through it again. Another question was, does an organization, a proposing organization, have to be a nonprofit? to get a grant. For-profit organizations can be part of proposals. Probably a better way to deal with that question is to email NSF at drlazel@nsf.gov. That's DRL for Division Research and Learning, AZLE, Advancing Informal STEM Learning, but all one word, drlazel@nsf.gov.
And we have another question. Can anyone submit resources or just AZLE grant recipients? It can be anyone. We have descriptions of funded grants from various federal agencies and private foundations, as well as research and evaluation work from both within and outside of NSF. So we definitely encourage you to submit your work. We really want this to be a resource for the entire field. Another question was the difference, someone trying to navigate whether to propose an AZLE or an SBIR. In terms of InformalScience.org helping with that, I would suggest we recently cataloged a number of SBIR projects that were funded by the Department of Education. You can find those on the site by searching for SBIR, but that would probably be another question that would be good for the program officers, drlazel@nsf.gov. The definition of a PI, someone asked, does it have to be a formal faculty appointee? No. It's, I think, the short answer. But again, the main criteria for any proposal is, a qualified team with track records and credible track records in the area of work, both topic and audience. Also a good question for the program officers. Okay, we have another question that says that literature is free to site members. How do you become a member, and does it cost money? It does not cost money. We are funded by AZLE as the AZLE Resource Center. To join the site, in the very top right-hand corner, there is a button that says register, and you just fill out that form, and you'll get an email back shortly after we approve it. We do go through and approve all site members just to make sure that they're real people and not spam. And yeah, anyone can join. There's a kind of a complex question, a good question here though, about evaluation and research, balancing the project's desire for evaluation versus conducting research that pushes the field forward. Definitely a question I would refer on to the program officers. Again, we have language in our two tabs on evaluation and research that help navigate those differences, and of course there are research projects that have evaluation components, and every project should have some evaluation mechanism as part of the proposal in the project. But the more nuanced answer would be better had by contacting the program officers. The URL azle@nsf.gov. No, the other way again. The one about graduate students. Okay. There's one about, is there a prior research project focusing on STEM graduate students? There may be on the site. You could search for that using the filters that Grace mentioned around audiences and such. You might also, again, contact program officers. That oftentimes program officers are the best source to help navigate which program at NSF you should be applying to. For example, in this case, it might Cadre may be more appropriate. The other resource center, Cadre.
but I would suggest DRL AZO at nsf.gov for that question.
Okay.
What does it mean? Is the site public? Okay.
All right. I think that's going to be about it for today. Thank you all for joining us, and stay tuned for the recording. And just one more reminder that if you have any additional questions that we weren't able to answer today, you can reach out to us at case@informalscience.org, or you can reach out to the program officers at drlazl@nsf.gov. And the recording should be going out sometime within the next couple days to everyone who attended or is registered for the webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.